Kim, welcome to Let's Talk Quality. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Kim, just give the listeners and the viewers just a very quick overview of who you are, what you're doing now.
Yes, my name is Kim Garko, and I am a pharma executive. I've been in the pharma industry a little over 22 years. I'm a virologist and a microbiologist, and by trade. But I've spent a large part of my career in biologics. But I also have a lot of experience in oral solid dose. I've done devices and combination products, and I've done neurologics. I've done oncology, and I've recently spent a lot of time in the renal space.
Great. So you're a virologist by trade. So how did you get
I am.
into quality?
Well, I thought I was going to spend a lot of time in academia, and then when it actually came down to it, I ended up taking a job as a virologist at Biogen. And I guess my whole career has been marked by, it's not by luck, but by different opportunities that have kind of shaped my path. I was at the time when Tysabri was voluntarily withdrawn from the market because of the JC virus. I was one of the virologists that was working for the company, and I got tapped. I was in the quality organization because I was in quality control, but that really marked my career and my movement over into quality assurance, and that was the beginning of my career and my trajectory.
So what were those early years in the Biogen labs? How was that? What did it teach you about quality that you couldn't have learned in any other way?
I had really good training at LSU. I think that my training as a postdoctoral fellow and as a postdoc really shaped, my training. And then when I went into the lab, being in a GMP environment really drives a certain mindset. But I'm OCD, so that really kind of complemented the whole GMP mindset. But when you're in that environment, the criticality of what you're doing and how it could potentially affect the patient is really the most important goal that you have. And I was in quality control. I didn't think about what my next steps were. And then one day I was in the lab, and the next day I was involved in this effort to return Tysabri to market. It just changed my whole career.
Okay. So when would you consider your first, I suppose, quality, out and out quality role? Then was Biogen your first QA
It was
role?
Biogen. Yeah. So after this was a huge effort to get Tysabri back to the market, and I was literally removed out of the lab, and I was working with executives. I was working with people from legal. It was the most transformative experience of my career, hands down. I was literally pulled out of the lab and tasked with doing things that were what I thought were well beyond my skill set at the time. But you put one foot in front of the other, and when I came back, I was like, I just can't go back and do what I was doing before because my ceiling had been raised. And then I went into product quality management. So that was really the first role where I was tasked with managing two different products, and one being Amaviv and the other one being Zevalin. And I was thrown into the deep end of the pool, which is where I love to live. And that was really my most significant quality role that I had, which is at Biogen.
So go back to Tysabri then. So on a
Yes,
high profile drug,
sure. It was.
very serious, I suppose, safety implications.
It was.
Talk us through that journey,
Uh,
and
uh,
what did it teach you about the sort of relationship between quality and patient safety?
well, I mean, there was clearly everyone believed in Tysabri, and there was a lot of safety data before they had launched the drug into the market. The moment that they had received the data that there was an issue with a patient, they voluntarily withdrew that drug from the market. I was involved in the safety effort, which was literally testing thousands of patient samples for JC virus. I was tasked, I was in the labs in Washington, D.C., testing patient cerebral spinal fluid samples for JC virus that they had, these were all clinical samples they had from the trial. And they were going back and trying to really understand if these patients had had JC virus and had not been detected. They said to me, "You're the quality person. You're going to test in the lab. This data, you're going to have to figure out how to get it back over to the Biogen folks. They're going to analyze it. We'd like you to write it up. Everything was confidential. The only person I spoke to were the executives. I wasn't speaking to anyone that I knew back at the ranch, so to speak. I was working with a seminal expert in the field, Dr. Eugene Major, and it was the most exhilarating, difficult, fun, challenging, as I said, transformative experience of my career. And I wrote a white paper. But again, if you think about this effort, I was just one spoke of a bigger wheel that they were working on at the same time. They're working with the FDA. There was a legal component. There was a regulatory component. And so my piece just went into this larger effort. There was a patient advocate effort, and it all went into this package to relaunch Tysabri into the market, which was eventually successful. And for my efforts, I won a leadership award from my efforts, and I was really very proud of that.
What was the leadership award?
So it was, I don't know if they still do it because I haven't been at Biogen for, but once a year they would award this leadership award for up to 6 people in the company that had demonstrated outstanding leadership. And I got nominated and I got the award, and it's sitting on my shelf in my living room, and something I'm very, very proud of. And it's something I didn't expect, but that really changed my journey and marked the beginning of, I think, my career, why I'm sitting here today.
Going back to that time then, what was your position at the time when you won that leadership award?
I was a supervisor in the quality control lab.
So you were
That's
still
it.
relatively junior in your.
I was so junior, but I was
And what
able
year
to
was
tap.
this?
Gosh, I have to go back. I started at Biogen in 2002, so it was shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's about 20
and
years ago.
but I was able to tap into leadership. I was tap into my technical pieces. I was able to collaborate. I was creative compliance, which is really kind of my term that I use all the time about how am I going to test all this data, and how am I going to use all the tools in my disposal to get this information back to the right people. And I'm only reporting to so many people, and I can't talk to anybody. And I'm interpreting this data myself, and it was a wonderful time. But like I said, it was stressful at the same time.
What do you think made you stand out to win that award from a somebody who's obviously seen something in you?
I think it was just the fact that I was very innovative. I was able to capitalize and on the very few tools that I have and just excel at what I did. And I literally raised my own ceiling. But I was given a just set of tools. And I was like, go get it. And I managed myself. It was a lot. I was a self starter, and it was a very critical piece of a very larger package. And I think it marks my personality, that I dive into the deep end of the pool, and I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to drive to success.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like that's a pivotal time in your career that you look back
It
on
was.
fondly.
It changed me both personally and professionally.
What specifically, how did it I know you've touched on it there, but what specifically did it change about you? How did that, I suppose, shape the rest or the next part of your career?
It gave me so much self-confidence, but it was a growth opportunity, and I saw that I wasn't just gonna be a person that was gonna be in the lab executing assays for the rest of my life. That it revealed that there was something else, that there were a lot more skills that I had and a lot more opportunities that were open to me that I was gonna be able to seize, and I did. And I I was like, if I can do this and I can raise my own ceiling, it's once you experience something and you transcend what you've done before, you can't go back. Because I was really wrestling with, what do I do at the end of this amazing experience? I can't just go back to doing what I did before. It was really I didn't know what I was going to do. And then when I went back, I was offered different opportunities. And with each opportunity, it was more and more responsibility, more and more challenges. And I thrived on that. And here I sit today.
How did talk us through the next few years then? How did from that sort of supervisor role? How did your leadership career evolve?
I was given the next role that I took, became the head of the QC labs, and then I was given a product quality management opportunity. And then the next thing you know, I was the site head of quality. And with each opportunity, there were different challenges, growth challenges, both personally and professionally. I learned so much. I didn't just stay in what I would call the quality box. I never was marked by a person that sat behind a desk. I took it as an opportunity to learn as much as I possibly could. I was at a site in North Carolina. I went out to the floor, even when I was in the QC lab, to learn the manufacturing processes, to learn the supply chain processes. Those opportunities and those learnings really shaped me and held me in good stead because I was able to really kind of push the boundaries of my knowledge and my leadership and put those things in my basket. Maybe I didn't use them right then, but they definitely came skills that I used and information that I used later. I just wasn't like staying on this path and this is my lane. I really pushed the boundaries of my lane of knowledge and learning.
Yeah. As your team grew at Biogen and you evolved into that site head of quality role, then
Mhm.
I'm guessing that you'd scale the quality team and you'd grown
Yes,
a
I
large.
did. Several turnaround effort opportunities as well.
What's the hardest thing about scaling a quality team without sort of losing that culture that makes it work or made it work originally?
One of the things you have to understand is the culture. And to understand the culture, you have to understand the people. And I think one of the things that marks me as a leader is I spent a lot of time getting to know the people in my organization. Anytime I moved into an organization, one of the things that I did is took the time to understand the landscape before I made any changes. Before you scale, you just don't go in, you don't start moving this furniture, so to speak. I took the time to understand the people, to try to understand what those challenges were, and to gather that data before I made those decisions. And then I made the scale. I tried to understand who were my leaders were in the organization, and I don't mean just by title. I mean by the people that could influence with and without authority. Were they sitting in the right role? I found that some people weren't sitting in the right role and making moves to really challenge them with the skills that they had were very successful. So when I'd look at that organization and reorganize it and then try to really kind of capitalize on that culture and keep that positivity. So if you really understand the culture and you give people opportunities, don't try to keep them in their box, allow them to grow. I think that's a large part of maintaining the culture because they feel like they can thrive. And with that, they get inspired and they feel like they have a growth opportunity and they feel like their ceiling has been raised. With that becomes it's a remarkable thing in an organization. It's not about me, it's about an us culture. And I think that's what's really important. It can't just be hierarchical. I think that's and Biogen was very much like that. It was not hierarchical. It was a growth opportunity. It was about growing out as well as growing up.
Yeah. Yeah. You touched on there what you were looking out for who your leaders are, not
Yes.
necessarily by position, but who are the people that you can get into the right roles and bigger
Yes.
roles. What are you looking for in when you're looking for leaders, whether that be by title or otherwise?
Are these individuals that are committed to when you want to say influence, like if you want to roll out some initiative and you want to get buy-in, who are the people that are able to influence it? Because there are people on the floor that are actually doing it. How are those folks going to go out there and teach? How are they going to influence the positivity? I'm looking for positivity. We all know that maybe one person that has a very negative influence or there's some level of toxicity in the organization can overtake a lot of positivity. That's what I'm looking for in an organization. That's somebody that's willing to teach, somebody that's willing to influence, that believes in what you're doing. They can go out and manifest that throughout the entire organization. For my people leaders, I'm looking for people that are willing to develop and spend time with their folks. Um, when people come to them with a problem, that active listening, that they're just not willing to take things at face value, but they're willing to dig into issues. It's not about hearsay, and they're willing to provide opportunities for folks, not maybe selfishly within their own organization, but even outside the organization. I've always told folks I'd rather lose you to another organization within the same company than lose you from the company. Because if you find that that is better for you in your trajectory within your career, how do I help you get there? And those things actually give you benefits in the longer term.
Yeah, that's great. I think there's a great insight into not just giving people in your organization an opportunity and identifying succession, but also when you're hiring people in the future and outside of the organization, what to look for. So
Yeah, integrity.
yeah,
Um, if I could add to that, you're looking for people that are genuine.
yeah,
I'm in the quality organization. You're looking for integrity. Are you going to do things for the right reason every single day? I've had folks that have reported to me and have actually followed me from different organizations and followed me when I've moved from different companies. But what has marked them is the fact that they have deep integrity. And even when the answer has been really difficult and said, no, Kim, I can't, we're not going to do this, that's the right answer. And, and when you live in a quality organization, you need people that can say, no, we can't do this. But the answer is not no. It's yes, but here are some of the challenges that you don't always want to look at the folks that you're the folks that you're collaborating. The answer can't just be no. It's yes, but here are some of the challenges, and here's how we can do this. It can't just always be no. And it's so easy to reject a batch. It's harder to keep a batch, and it's do the work, or sometimes it's harder to say yes and do the work. Are you willing to invest the time? Do you have a leadership team that's willing to invest the time and do that work, or they just want to push a button and say no?
yeah, awesome.
I'd rather have a team that's wants to.
Yeah,
Are you going to go in there and fight with me? And those are the types of people that I've surrounded myself with.
Kim, the next chapter of your career then, post Biogen.
Yeah.
So was it Striker and then Akebia?
No, I actually went to Doman, which was pushed me into the world of consulting, which is a calling. Um, I'm I'm not as good at the BD part of consulting, but I spent some time and I learned a lot about devices. That's really where I learned all my device experience. And then I actually did some independent consulting after Doman. I was an executive consultant, and I really specialized with firms that had gotten themselves into some trouble with the FDA, warning letters. And I did some independent consulting with my own company, but I also subcontracted. And I found that everywhere I went, people wanted to offer me a job. um, but I loved that environment. I don't know if it gave me a dopamine rush, an adrenaline rush, or what, but I really was good at remediation. I found that that was a core skill for me. How do we fix, and how do we get back to a state where you're in compliance? And when you find that that's a core skill for you, that's where I really honed in my skills as a consultant. And I had a deep understanding of the regulations, of compliance, but I also was really good at not the black and white, the shades of gray. And that's really why clients liked me, because it was like, well, this is the only way you can do that. I could actually carve out multiple ways of getting there, and which is also good when you're thinking about the financial ramifications of doing that, of how to get back into compliance. And they really appreciate that when you give people risks, options, and how to get back into compliance. So I risk-based, phase appropriate, and then, just being able to have really fulsome conversations about how to get back to where they need to get. So when a lot of people ran away from burning buildings, I ran into them and I was very good at it. And then I was actually a consultant for Stryker. It was Sage, and Stryker had acquired them, and they had gotten themselves into some trouble with a warning letter. And I was a consultant, and they actually hired me. And I was like, this seemed to fit. I took the job, and I spent about 2.5 years there, and I loved it. And we actually were able to remove the warning letter very successfully, but it was a whole series of inspections, Health Canada, the FDA. But I love inspections, by the way. I spent a lot of time in inspections, but I get a thrill out of
When you
inspections.
when
They're
you
great. It's a lot of
when
fun.
you walk into that situation, warning letters, recalls,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
what is the first thing that you do as a quality leader in that situation?
You have to assess the entire problem in terms of what is the scope of the problem, what are the highest risks, what is the low hanging fruit, and then what do you have to, like, with respect to the highest risk, what do you have to overcome? In terms of patient risk, safety risk, I look at those first because those are significant. And then you put together a remediation plan, and how are you going to overcome that? And then there are multiple work streams with those. There's a legal work stream, there's a quality work stream, there's a regulatory work stream, and then there's even sub-levels to that. And then how do you put that together? Because it's all integrated. It's not just quality. It has to integrate with an entire larger plan. And how do you execute on that? But what are your largest risks? And do you understand that, is there a product that's affected that immediately you have to say, this needs to be quarantined and it's going to sit here? Is it done? You know you're going to have to reject this. And then what do you have to do next, that next level, to say, this is salvageable, but at the same time, I have to fix the quality system and strengthen it. And it's not the Band-Aid approach, right? It's the long-term, long runway approach. But it's all risk, and it's all compliance and remediation. It can't just everybody wants the runway, but this is where I call it the cost of quality. And it's not the cost to fix it. It's the cost that you're paying because you didn't have quality integrated into your quality management system consistently, that you were not doing regulatory surveillance and understanding what you needed to be doing a good job of constantly surveilling the health of your quality system and having the right indicators and the flashing lights to tell you that you had a problem or a weakness, that you were opening yourself up to pressure testing your own quality management system. That's what your internal inspection program is for. That's also why I like inspections. It's a good way to have them come in and pressure test you and say, take the blinders off and not be myopic and say, how well are we doing? But that's the cost of quality. And so trying to understand that it's not just, again, not band-aids, but how do you remediate that for the longer term?
Thanks for that rundown. How about product recalls and CRLs, which I know you've had experience of dealing with?
Yes.
And
Yes.
what is that? I suppose when you go into an organization, what does that period when you're leading a response to product recalls?
Those first minutes are horrible.
How does it feel? What's how do you keep the team together?
I can give you an example. I had asked for an outside consultant to come in and do an audit. It was a week-long audit. By the third day, we knew we had a problem. By the fourth day, we were in a recall. I can tell you that personally, when you know that there's a problem inside, there's a lot of feelings, like you feel a pit in your stomach, the flashing lights are going off and you're like, we got a problem. And then immediately for me, it starts kicking off into what do we have to do? You have to inform the leadership, which is a difficult thing to do. It's going to set off a whole level of concern for everyone. But then it's getting the team to say, all right, everybody, here's our task. You have to be able to sit down and have the plan. You can't just say, well, what are we going to do? Everyone, here's the work stream. This is what you have to do. This is what you have to do. This is what you have to do. But everybody within their work stream has a leadership. I'm not running the entire piece. Like as the head of quality, I am responsible and accountable, but everybody has to know what they have to do. And there are some folks that are not going to know what to do because they've never been in a recall, but you have to provide that direction. But it's being very organized, having frequent periods where everybody comes back together. We talk about what the progress is, what the challenges are. Everybody deploys back out, coming back in, but it's really about being very organized, understanding what those time constraints are so that your plan is very integrated, because typically there is a field alert that's associated, so you have to meet that time constraint, get that field alert out. But it's also being I had a lot of help with my first recall. We brought in some outside consultants. Don't you can't be shy to bring in outside help. You should, right? There's there's no ego here. What help do you need? And you should immediately bring that into it. It takes a village to do these things, but it's about the level of positivity. You don't want to sink into woe is me. It's okay, everybody. This is what we got to do. We're going to take this one hour at a time, one step at a time, one day at a time. And that very methodical approach helps because people don't get overwhelmed, right? We know what we have to do. This is the first milestone. This is the second milestone, and building that rapport, that confidence. And as we start to tick off some of the things, and we start to make progress, everybody starts to feel better because all right, we got that done. We got that done. We got that done. It's really no different than trying to put together an NDA, like those same steps, but you're doing it for a very different reason. You have to kind of think about it that way. But it's on an accelerated timeline. But you have to keep the team together, and everybody has to understand what they're doing, and they have to be very organized.
What about complete response letters? When I know it's obviously a devastating moment when
It
that
is. It
happens.
changes a whole organization.
Yeah,
It does.
reductions in workforce. You've got to deal with managing quality still whilst dealing with less people, and headcount and the
Yeah.
fallout of all of that.
My biggest learning from that, yeah. So I've been through a complete response letter where you do a reduction in force. I think what nobody anticipates is the knowledge management piece. When you do a reduction in force, people get up and they walk out. The knowledge management piece is the most difficult thing that no one anticipates, that everybody has just walked out and everything in their head has walked out with them. There are papers left on their desk. That's not what you've lost. You've lost the know-how. You've lost years and years of experience. And if you don't have a good knowledge management program, it's difficult to get that back. And I learned that the hard way. Like, how are you going to do knowledge management before you don't want to wait till you have a RIF to have a knowledge management program? That number one. Number two, it's dealing with the emotional pieces that a RIF. It is very emotional and it's very, very difficult. If it's done with a level of respect for everyone, even if it's difficult, it does ease some of the anxiety. And I saw it done with a huge level of respect, which I think made everyone feel better. When there's a RIF and there's a lot of effort to make sure that those people have a place to go and they get placed or they have resources, I think that's really important. And when the executives do a really good job with that, I think that's another part. Managing the quality system with the fact that we have less people and having to sit down and say, how are we now going to re-engineer our quality management system, and how can we function when a lot of these folks are gone? How are our SOPs can't are different because you're now going to have to revise them because they can't be executed as they were. Again, you're going to have to assess the risk, put together a plan, execute against the plan. And you just have to treat it again like it's crisis management 101, but you again, risk management, plan, execute against the plan, and have those people execute against the plan. And it's not all going to be done in a day, but you obviously worked with that plan. But if you have the right people in the right place that you've seated in your organization, your leaders, you're able to execute against that plan. That goes back to kind of like the beginning of our conversation about having the right people, not even just with titles, but the people that can execute and that you know that are responsible and that can influence that organization, help carry it forward.
Yeah, thanks. That's such a really practical, almost blueprint workflow of how to navigate those situations. You've been through a lot in the last few years with Akebia.
Yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate the opportunity and I learned so much there, but it was a lot and I learned a lot. But I mean, if you see like the themes that you've been talking about, they all overlay and they're all sound different, but you execute against them in several ways, but they're scaled. And you do them the same way with maybe different people, but it's again risk and you have to have the right people in the right roles to help you execute against them. And they don't have leadership titles against their name to be successful.
And when you go through all of that hardship and working through long hours, stressful situations, dealing with fallout, but you get a win at the end of it,
Yes.
a product launch with patients. What does that moment feel like after everything the organization and you as a leader goes through?
I think everybody has their personal moments where I think there's a moment of exhilaration and you celebrate with your team, and then there's exhaustion where you want to go lay down. I think what's really important that we as leaders forget sometimes to do, admittedly, is celebrate those successes. We don't celebrate even the small successes enough. And I myself have been guilty of that, where you get so into, all right, we've done that, on to the next. You got to celebrate those successes. And I was really big on trying to acknowledge people, to say thank you and to acknowledge people for their hard work. I was really big on advocating people and saying, "Look, everybody, like if you had an all hands, I want to thank my group. I want to acknowledge so and so." I think that's really, really important. People want to be seen. That's how you celebrate. It's the team and making sure that the team feels seen and known that they are appreciated in some ways. It's not always about money, or although that's nice if you can give them something to acknowledge them, but they want to feel appreciated and valued. And I think when you get on the other side of these things, making sure that they know that what they did was appreciated and understood, and knowing that they got something out of it for their growth, but they were recognized, I think that's really important.
Yeah, awesome. Kim, I'm just sort of coming towards the end of this discussion, which has been brilliant. I've really enjoyed it. I noticed on your, a LinkedIn that you'd sort of reposted a few things around, female leadership, and then I think there was
Yeah.
an article on the myth of the intimidating female leader. I was reading
Yes.
it, but I suppose for you, someone who's operated at SVP level, CTO level, in recent times,
Yeah.
in a heavily scientific and often male dominated
It's true.
space. What's your take on that?
I just know that I'm very firm in my convictions. I'm very passionate person. I know, like I'm speaking for myself for how I'm wired. So it's not just about being female. I think it's like, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I don't join women's groups. I just want to be seen as a leader, agnostic of the fact that I'm female. I want to be seen for the skills that I have. It's Kim. She's passionate. She is very technical. She has a lot of experience. She brings a lot of things to the table. I, but agnostic of the fact that I'm female, and not that I'm aggressive, but that I'm really leaning in hard because I really believe in this and that I'm pushing for this because I know that I can get this done and I give me that task. So female leadership isn't about being female, it's about being competent and having the same skills and being just recognized for being a very strong leader. If that makes sense.
Makes complete sense. Yeah, I mean, there's not many quality leaders that progress to C-level roles, and you've you know you progress to a chief technical officer overseeing CMC, supply chain quality, different functions, right? So it's your career is an inspiration to a lot of people that would be early on in their journey in quality. And some people see quality as getting to vice president level, SVP, chief quality officer, and then what's after that. Some people might go into consulting, but there's often this, where do you go next in your career? I suppose, what advice would you give to someone who might be in earlier on in their leadership career, maybe at director level, possibly, who is in quality but would like to go into a C-suite position in the future?
The one thing I did that was a mistake is I always thought this was it for me. I'm associate director of quality control. This is probably as far as I'm going to get. Never think that. And I was always surprised when I moved up. Know your value. That's my advice. The one thing that I didn't recognize until very late was my value. Always know your value and what that means and what you bring to the table, because I think that's what drives you forward. Be much more purposeful. And don't assume that you're gonna be with the same company until you retire. I made that mistake very early on. I thought I was gonna be like Derek Jeter and be with the Yankees until he retired, and I wasn't. When I left Biogen, I lost part of my identity. I thought, "What am I gonna do?" I was at Biogen, I thought I was gonna retire from here. Don't put yourself in that box. It's okay to move over to another company, to a different role, even to sidestep and not even necessarily move over to get more skills so that you can move up. But know your value and be very purposeful about how you're moving forward, and get as many skills as you can and put them in your basket, so to speak, because they will provide you benefit and ROI as you move forward.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, and
Well, thanks for
also,
having me.
yeah, absolute pleasure. It's been great. I've really enjoyed it, and there's so much value there. I think for a lot of quality leaders, whatever stage in their career. Um, so thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank
Just
you.
just quickly, I suppose, looking ahead, what are you most excited about moving forwards?
That there's It's a blank slate and I can write it, and, I know that, based on what I've done, I can do anything. I don't know what my next role is gonna be, but I'm not in a hurry to fill it. I'm being very purposeful with what I'm gonna do next, but I'm grateful for all the experiences that I've had because they've shaped who I am as a leader. And I've met some very great people along the way, and I've had some really great teams that have reported into me, and, I'm always very grateful for that. But it could be consulting, it could be another C-level role, it could just be something very different in a different therapeutic space. I don't It doesn't have to be one thing or the other, I'm just trying to explore what that is.
Kim, pleasure to have you on. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Best of
Thank
luck
you.
with everything for the year
I
ahead.
appreciate that.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.